Do you like buying property? Are you a property nerd? Do you surf realestate.com for fun? Maybe you should consider being a buyer's advocate.
Going once, going twice, sold! You're listening to the Property Pod.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Property Pod, your weekly engagement into real estate here in your Hobart marketplace. No time to mess around with all the you-haring that I normally start with. Actually, I'm flying solo in the studio this morning as I record this intro. The boys are out and about doing things. I think Pat is over in Western Australia and John doing a gin delivery, would you believe? So, find out more about that in the future. Today, we are joined by a special guest. Today, we have special guest Emily Wallace, a buyer's advocate from our own backyard here in Tassie. She's currently taking over the world of Melbourne, however, with a mission to empower first-home buyers and friendly home upsizers. She's really passionate about what she does and a real superstar. Purchasing property is a task that most people only undertake a few times in their life, and it's pretty daunting, pretty scary. It's kind of why we started this podcast. So having someone like Emily on is super handy. So as a buyer's advocate with a background in teaching, she started her career in a similar way to mine and then found her way into real estate. She believes all buyers should have the same level of representation as the vendor. So as a buyer's advocate, Emily levels the playing field for buyers and represents them through the entire purchasing process. Her goal is to reduce fear and anxiety and buying property through education and trust and sharing all her knowledge with others. She also has her own podcast that she co-hosts, which is My Millennial Property Podcast. Check that out if you can, but no time to mess around. We're just going to jump straight into our chat with Emily Wallace. I'm sure you're going to love this one. Jump on in to our new episode. Well, welcome by our guest today, who is Emily Wallace. Emily, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. So I'm born and bred Tasmanian, which I'm very proud of, and I let people know about all the time.
We're proud of that
Tassie.
Too.
In my professional life, I'm a buyer's advocate. I basically work for buyers in the property transaction, and absolutely love real estate, property obsessed, property nerd, self-confessed, have a great time doing it.
Yeah, it's super interesting. We were just kind of talking a little bit before we started recording about your past. Not only are you Tasmanian, you trained to be a primary school teacher, which that was my background as well. So, funnily enough, we've found our way into real estate. Started off with a completely other kind of career goal in mind. How long were you doing that just before we jump into property?
So I finished the degree, and in my final year, I actually knew I didn't want to go into the classroom. So I did a final year, full year teaching year fours here in Melbourne. And I was like, this is not for me. So I did a few days relief total, but I ended up in the recruitment side of education. So I'd never officially worked as a teacher.
No, well, look, I have a very similar story where I was doing my fourth year prac and I was like, oh no, like I don't think this is what I thought it was going to be. And then battled it out for a little while and was like, no, I'm going to do something else.
Check out.
Yeah, the one thing I have found with, especially doing the podcast or working in this space is there are ways to educate, lots of people through other things. So I did pick up a bunch of skills, but I am really sick of my HEC stat still hanging over me and being like, oh man, that degree I never use.
Very true.
I always do like hearing about what a person did before real estate, because it's always really different, because at some point everyone goes, I'm just going to have a crack at real estate, you know? Yeah. We see it early in their careers or, really, really late in life as well. How did you transition?
Yeah, I still ask myself that question, to be honest, because it all unfolded so rapidly. It was never a clear intention of mine. It was something that came in front of me and I sort of followed it and it led me to where I am. It was never a really big plan to do what I've ended up doing. So basically what happened was I saw a paid ad on LinkedIn that said, do you like buying property? Are you a property nerd? Do you surf realestate.com for fun? Maybe you should consider being a buyer's advocate. Like I mentioned, I bought my first investment property, but I had never heard the term buyer's agent or buyer's advocate in that process. It was all foreign to me. Learned about it, saw the gap in the market for first home buyers. And honestly, from hearing that and understanding that ad and a phone call behind it, it was 3 months to quit my corporate job and start in the industry. So I didn't mess around. It was a very quick decision, and one that I entered into quite naively in hindsight, but I'm very glad that I did it the way I did because it's paid off.
But how did that naivety benefit you, though? I think that's not a bad thing sometimes.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Probably the biggest thing was the financial component. Like I definitely should have saved more money before I just decided to not have an income for 6 months. But no, I think the biggest thing was I went in with the mindset of educating buyers. And that's because that's what I thought you would just do, like tell people what you do and educate them on how to do it themselves and, create a bit of an expert in the industry. And no one else is really doing that. And that kind of has led to where the business being where it is today. But yeah, I was just a bit naive about how you even get business. I just took my own approach and it was different to everybody else. So yeah.
Just before we go any further down the road, this is where I get to jump in and kind of say, like, I'm the guy outside real estate. I don't know all these things. For the listeners out there that would have been like you and would have thought, like, what is a BA? Like, what does a buyer's advocate do? I think you've got a really good analogy about searching a car yard. I looked on your TikTok or your Instagram. Could you talk us through, kind of just let the listener know, like, what is a buyer's advocate?
Definitely. So fundamentally, I think the first thing to understand is the real estate agent, the sales agent, is engaged and paid by the vendor. That is their client. And I always go by the philosophy, if you're not paying, you're not the client. A lot of buyers, don't get me wrong, agents can really help buyers, but at the end of the day, they're not there to save you money. They're there to get the highest price possible for the vendor. So a buyer's advocate is the opposite of that. It's the person who advocates for the buyer and gives them independent opinion and gives them choice. So with the car example, it's like if you go to Toyota's only going to sell you what they have, a Corolla, whatever else they have, I don't know, the types of the Toyotas that they have. They're not going to tell you, hey, go down the road to
Mazda or
Ford.
Tesla or someone.
Yeah, and try one of their cars because they don't get paid to sell you a Ford. They get paid to sell you a Toyota. So the biggest thing a buyer's advocate does, because they're independently engaged by the buyer, they don't care what real estate agency has the property because it actually doesn't impact their outcome. They're paid and engaged by the buyer to pick the best possible property regardless of who's selling it.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome.
It's such an interesting point because speaking from the seller's agent perspective, is it we can be seen as very unhelpful for the buyer's journey. I think, well, they go, oh, look, well, can you help me find a property? It's like, well, I'd love to, but unless it's through our company, I'm not going to get paid. So, and like you said at the beginning of your career, when your whole structure is paid by transactions and not by the hour, you really have to understand and remember who it is that you're investing your time in and getting paid from. So I think a lot of buyers, and which I love the other side of counter for buyers agents because they can actually experience what it's like to have a professional working for them. And I just don't, most of their experience getting into the industry would not understanding that fact that, look, no one's actually working for you. And there's a lot of animosity can be built because of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's quite interesting when you think about it though. Like if you were going through a court case, the defense has a lawyer. And so does the other side. Like both people are represented. It's just so funny that in real estate you kind of rely on one person to be the middle person for both sides, even though they're only working for one side. It's quite an interesting concept.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it as well. I've never really thought about that. Yeah, I guess we've kind of spoken about gatekeepers and stuff, but there's always been that idea of, you've got to kind of traverse through this tricky minefield. But only really one side is being represented in that equation. Can you kind of talk to me and the listeners about, like, what does a day in the life of a buyer's agent kind of look like?
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's hectic. It's organized chaos most of the time between contacting real estate agents to source properties for our clients, prospecting for new clients. So simply, trying to look at some buyers that might want to work with us to help them, inspecting properties, negotiating deals. Saturdays are auction bidding. It's a lot of time on the road and it's a lot of time on the phone. They're probably the two key activities that I do the most.
For sure.
It's actually quite minimal admin, really. There's not a whole lot of admin on my side, which I'm lucky about because I don't really like admin.
Me.
I don't know who does.
You guys are two peas in a pod over here.
Although we did do a big personality. I'm going off track, but a big personality test for our business, and it just defined who hates admin and who just lives for it. You know?
And you're at the top of the.
I'm
the
on the
hate list.
real fast spectrum. Sorry, I mean, you keep going.
Yeah, they're different skill sets, aren't they?
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
so yeah, a vast majority is inspecting and qualifying properties for our clients. And trying to get them as much choice as possible. And that really comes back to how many real estate agents want to do deals with us and will give us exclusive access to properties that they have, or at the very least, some intel on a property they have coming up, which is the aim of the game.
Yeah, I kind of saw in your in my little research phase of preparing for this that you had another video that was kind of like, we are friends with real estate agents, like they're not the enemy. Building that relationship is really important.
Yeah, and like we took a team out for lunch last week. We've done a few deals with them, and it was just like sitting down with colleagues. Like we really are friends with them.
Yep.
We do make sure that we're very much on the buyer's side, and they're very much on the vendor side. Like we go into battle for each other's best interests, but certainly it's a lot easier to get information out of people and to put deals together when you actually have a friendly approach rather than a us against them approach.
Well, I guess that another thing is kind of, if you're the agent, the selling agent on your side of the fence, John, and you've got listings coming up, or you've got buyers, or you want to find the buyers, you've literally got a resource there where they're like, hey, like, let's team up, let's make this work. And you don't have to go through all the extra marketing phase and kind of, or the hunt of finding the buyer. You've got someone that's basically doing that for you.
Excellent. And you're dealing, one of the things that I love is that you're dealing with another professional in the industry. So the conversations are very, very different. In that, like if Emily and I were to engage in a negotiation, we'll be able to quickly cut through the noise very, very quickly because we know all the terminology, we know all the terms, we know what everything means.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm trying to negotiate with a first-time buyer's just come in, I'll often spend 30 minutes just walking them through the terms of the contract, so that at the time when we're ready to start discussing price and terms, they know what the hell they're even talking about. I don't mean that maliciously, but for me, it's from a seller's perspective, I need to ensure that a deal, even if it's signed, prices are relevant. Is it going to go through?
Yeah.
And you can be guaranteed if you're working with a buyer's agent, well then just by through that connection alone, it's like this contract is 100% solid. Whether or not those terms are going to work for us, we'll get through that. But by me working with Emily, I know that this is something I can depend upon.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I know auctions aren't as common in Tassie, although I wish they were because they're always really good fun.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah, like they're a great avenue to sell a property. But in Victoria, like we're the auction capital over here, and when a buyer's agent rocks up to an auction, the agent knows they've got at least one person bidding on the property, and it just de-stresses them. It makes the process easier. We're going to bid at some point. We haven't gotten this far to just rock up and watch. Like we're bidding and it's guaranteed. So I think that also helps in the auction arena as well.
That's got to be like a good feeling. It's almost like a rock star showing up, or like, like when they do the wrestling entrances where they walk into the room.
Right.
You need like entrance music, like Emily Wallace.
Oh, please do that. Please do that.
Big, what are they called? The
fireworks
going up in the background.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm doing that. If ever you bid an auction, we're bringing fireworks.
Well,
I promise you.
Your recent, so John's older brother is Luke McGregor, the stand-up comedian and television presenter.
Yeah.
So John did an auction only recently, and I swear you were like practicing some gear, like some real comedy gear. You're like, all right, I'm gonna get the stretches going on. I was like, I feel like I'm at a stand-up gig and an auction all at once.
The interesting thing is, we know it's more likely that nothing's going to happen, but you still need to put on a show.
Yep.
So at least for the there was one where it ends up just becoming more of a just a presentation, I guess, to keep everyone engaged, even though no one wants to put their hand up.
Well, I enjoyed the giggle. I was well, if Luke needs brothers in arms for the comedy show, he's got someone to talk to.
That would be a terrible mistake. He'd just be like, oh man, I should not have got my brother on the stage.
Yeah.
They call it street theatre over here when there's no one, when they know there's no one who's going to show up. It's just like, it's free street theatre for everyone in the neighbourhood to come watch. You used to do a coffee van and, I don't know, bubbles and like kids bubbles, not champagne bubbles, and lollipops and stuff.
It would work. Yeah. Well, actually, one thing I was curious, Em, is I know with so with this, I just got through the REIA an ethics review on industry generally speaking. Real estate agents, as normal, failed hard. And I remember there was one where we're the top 50 professions, and then distrusted professions. Normally there's normally the top 20, which we never make. One year they released the top 50 and we got like 47. But what got me was that the average Australian will trust their run-of-the-mill sex worker more than their average real estate agent, which was actually on the thing. I was like, okay, well, that's where we're starting. That's really interesting. But I was curious, do you, from a buyer's advocacy, I just never hear it spoken as the same as it does when representing sellers. What's the experience you've been like when if you think back to the start? Now you've built up a reputation, it's very different. But early on, do you find the same backlash or pessimism related to buyers working as a buyer's agent versus the other side? What's your experience around that been?
That's a really great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that, and I'm really passionate about it because the reason I actually chose to be on the buying side was to shape how BAs are perceived in the industry and to the public. So when I entered, funnily enough, I actually got offered 3 different jobs as a sales agent. People were like, come work with us. So, like, unfortunately, the impression, particularly in Victoria, is already made of what you are, and I want to impact what an advocate or a buyer's agent can look like. So we're actually really well received by the general public. The issue that can arise is when, and this is getting into technicalities of fees and stuff like that, but when a buyer's agent charges a percentage of the purchase price as their fee. So for context with the listeners, when someone's selling a property, it's not uncommon that the selling agent gets a percentage of the sale as their fee, usually 2%, 3%, depends, every state's different. And so that's great because if they've sold the property, then the vendor pays the money once it's sold and they've got an outcome. When you're working as a buyer's agent, if you're paid based on the percentage of what the client spends, if you think about it logistically, you're probably going to want to spend the most amount of their budget because you're going to get paid more, which is contradictory to saving people money. And B, you're probably going to favour buyers who have more budget because you're going to get paid more overall, and it actually wipes out the people in the market who need your help, which is typically first-home buyers. So I think in the reputation side of things, I'm very passionate about a fixed fee for that very reason, and to try and keep, I guess, a benchmark of expectation of what you can experience with a buyer's agent, which is there's no best practice manual in the industry for us, which is actually a real downfall.
I think that's such an interesting point on the basis of incentive, isn't it? Because what you just described there is if you are working on the basis of percentage is, yes, the bigger money, the bigger paycheck for you, but also too, there is no real incentive to negotiate hard in the favour of the buyers. Like, well, screw it. If we pay an extra 50K to the max of their budget, who cares? You know, because there's no, because you're incentive at the wrong side. I know in the States, for example, what's interesting about that part is obviously they've got their buyers and sellers agents, but it's not quite true. At least in Australia, there's a transparent element where you are getting paid by the buyer. In the States, what happens is there's a larger commission split, be it 4, 5, 6%, and then the seller agent, the seller is paying everybody. And then what happens? Like, just imagine Emily and I working in the States. Well, I'll keep a side, and Emily will keep a side, all paid by the seller. So the sort of the same, just I don't know, the odd incentive structure works in the same basis.
Yeah, for sure.
So I totally understand where you come from, Emily. And like, how is that in searching for clients then? What has that looked like because I know there's a lot of egos that are driven in this industry with bigger paychecks. What's that been like with you bringing on in your business new clients as well, knowing that you've got a different fee structure or attempting to...
Yeah. Are you an outlier to the crowd?
I wouldn't say I'm an outlier in necessarily the fee structure because a lot of people are shifting to the fixed fee because more and more people win business off a fixed fee than a percentage. But what I would say is that we have refined quite heavily to purchase properties pretty much under 1.5 million. Now, in some areas that sounds like a lot of money. In others, it's barely anything. It won't even get you like a 2-bedroom house. So, which is crazy in itself. But I think our point of difference is that we sort of are the little fish and we're helping the first home buyers. Most advocacies will have a minimum spend and it might be 2 mil as the entry level. And some are more like only do 5 mil plus because they'll only do a deal every 6 weeks, but they're getting paid, like 60 to 100K a deal. So
2 deals a year and you're
bank.
Just
move to Malta,
which is a terrific idea.
I really love the idea of let's get in and help these first home buyers. And it was kind of where this podcast was born, was the
Mm.
idea of there's this group of people who are being like moved out of the system, like this idea of the Australian dream of owning a home is being taken away. Let's find a way of educating people. And obviously with your education background, it's a really key, big part of what drives you. What kind of people do you find that you come across? Like, do you have a normal demographic of buyers? What would you call it? Like, of clients?
Yeah, we do. Can describe our top 2 people that we like, profiles that we work with.
Yeah.
Number 1 is a young couple who are probably in their mid to late 20s who have a dog. They want a courtyard or a backyard for their dog, and they're planning for baby number 1. And they want like a 2-bedroom entry level villa unit or townhouse, definitely under $1 million. So that's our main. Like, we buy so many of those. And then the other profile we deal a lot with, which I love, are single female clients who are buying solo, so their mortgage is a little bit less. It's not a dual income household, probably between 600,000 to 700,000 as their sort of safe base of, this is what I'm starting with. If I meet someone down the track, this will become an investment property for me. They're sort of setting their financial house up from the get-go. And that's probably, I think that's what I attract, because that's what I am, probably. But yeah, that's what we do a lot of.
I'm wondering as well, like, obviously in the way that you market yourself, your kind of online presence is quite large. You've got a big following on TikTok. You've got your podcast. I'd love to know more about kind of how you got into that. But do you think that working in that space is what's attracted those people who are using kind of those platforms to find your services?
Most definitely. Especially TikTok. A lot of millennials on TikTok who endlessly scroll are all guilty of it. We're not really dealing with many established families who are looking to upsize. We used to do a little bit more of it, but a lot more are probably 35 years and under.
Can you like kind of take us down that road of kind of being like, I'm going to jump into this world of TikTok and podcasting and educating people that way? I was so against the world of TikTok when it came out. I know just this idea of these crazy dancing, but I use it all the time, and it's really useful. Once the algorithm works out what you're kind of like,
you're down the rabbit hole.
It feeds you some pretty good content.
It's the best algorithm setup I've ever seen. So I've sort of graduated from platform to platform. I think, like, I started heavily on LinkedIn when LinkedIn video was a big thing back in 2018, and that's how I grew the business initially. And that was a really great platform. Then I moved to Instagram, and I focused on Reels a lot and posting a lot of stories I document everything that I was doing. And now I'm still on Instagram a fair bit. I've got a really loyal community, but now I've graduated to TikTok. And I only wish I'd gotten on TikTok sooner, because the rewards from TikTok, it's such an instant reward of people watching your content, resonating with it, finding out, who you are, booking a call. Like, I can't spend enough time on TikTok, to be honest, in terms of promoting the business for the return that we get in qualified clients coming to us. We have a wait list now for clients, purely because we just blown up on TikTok, and it's content that people are finding useful. Even if they don't use our services, they get value out of what we put out there.
Yeah, well, even I was going to say, as I was traversing through the suburbs of Melbourne videos, they're amazing. They're so good. Do you have a videographer that does that? Sorry, this is not part of the podcast.
That's okay. Yeah, we do have a videographer who does the more detailed shoots. Suburbs of Melbourne is a segment that he helps with. Yes,
it's really amazing. It's something I've been trying to get up off the ground, like similar down here. Shout out to your videographer and for you guys. I love when you're talking to the people in the streets and tell us all about Northcote, and they're just, this over here is a beautiful cafe.
Yeah.
I love this stuff.
They're so passionate. Neighbours are always so passionate about their area.
Well, I guess that's the thing, is that it again, I've certainly noticed is that the idea of like the perception of real estate agents is not great, but ironically everyone wants to talk about it and talk to us about it. And talk about themselves about it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think no matter how much technology does advance and, this changing world that we live in, real estate, I believe, will remain a people business where real estate agents are required, and the skill set that can't be done by a robot, is required. And that's that human element of the process, selling or buying a property for someone is a huge milestone. It's a big financial milestone. It's a life-changing decision. A lot of people, it's, moving from one chapter of their life to another. So yeah, there's definitely that room for, I don't think it'll be taken away by the advances in technology. There's room for the human element there for sure.
Well, that's where, for me, I guess because I'm much more person driven rather than technology.
You're an analog man.
Yeah. But it's that everyone gets excited about, AI is the next, it's just the next thing. Is it the next thing? It's like, how the hell is AI supposed to do what you do, Em? Like, rock up to auctions, visit the properties, aside from.
No, I've worked it out. You get that profile that we got before about the person with the dog, and then you send that down to another AI computer.
And here's 10 properties.
Yeah.
Here's 10 properties. But, well, I mean, I thought that, say, there's a lot of those different referral companies where they'll say, give us your information, we'll connect you with 3 different real estate agents. And I got to see behind the scenes of what that looks like. And ironically, there wasn't a hell of a lot of work that was done behind it. They just went, oh, here's 3 people, here's some sales, and then you go call them now. There's very little, work that goes into that.
Yep.
But I know on the ground, like how much legwork that you have to do in order to secure those properties eventually for those clients. It's just a phenomenal amount of hours sometimes. And on your website, it said we'll often, find your house within 31 days on average. But I mean, tell me, like, how often can you remember a client? Can you remember the longest time you've been working with a client?
Yes, I can. It was last year, so 2022. They're the only client. So we have a 90-day, a 3-month engagement, and every client except this one client bought within that time frame. And people don't even really near the 60-day mark. Like really, it's between 4 and 6 weeks. But this client, and they're such a beautiful client, like we love them. There wasn't anything wrong with them going over time. The reason they took so long is because the stock levels at the price point they were sort of like a $3 to $4 million buyer, one of our biggest buyers. You just don't. The hold time on those properties is so long that you're lucky to get one property that's in the area they want, like every 8 weeks, maybe, if you're lucky. Yeah. So the reason that blew out was because of that, and they were fine. Like we got them a great house in the end, and they're really, really happy, and they're going to do renos and live there forever. But yeah, we had them probably for, I think, 5.5 months in the end. Wow. But they were lovely people. It's probably different when expectations aren't aligning or there's something not quite right, but that wasn't the case for these clients. It was just timing.
On the flip side, what about like shortest engagement? Has there been like, hey, boom, I've got you 4 hours later?
Last week, so we engaged a client on we met with them on the Friday to send out their profile on the Tuesday. Yep. Harry, my brother who works with me, he posted something on socials on the Thursday. So 2 days later, I got through it on the following, it's like an agent replied, on Instagram with the property. I got through on the Monday. The client got through on the Thursday. So we're like, 9 days in?
Yeah.
And this week we've just signed the contract for it, off-market exclusive access. She's been looking for 8 months before using us.
Yep.
And we found something in area, in budget, bigger than what she expected she could buy. And yeah, she'll move in before Christmas. That was like a 9-day turnaround.
That's awesome. That's so good.
That's money for jam as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
For the client, not for you.
Yeah.
It's just like the amount of work that she otherwise would have had to spend to do it on her own is insane. Weekend inspections, private inspections, new relationships.
The biggest thing in that is that agent knows us so well that he instantly replied to the Instagram story because he's like, I know that if you've got someone, you'll wrap it up. Like he just, whilst the time taken to actually get the property was so small, that relationship's been 4 years in the making to make sure that that's how they perceive us and, how we deal with them. So it is, you can't really put a dollar value on that because it results in an awesome outcome.
Oh, look, and that's what I think people just don't see is that, look, the reason why I was able to go through smoothly for you is because it's been 5 years worth of work before just for you to come in at this one moment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I mean, what are the common objections to someone using you? Like what do you often come across?
Price is always the biggest one because people have to pay us It's not like when someone sells, they've got the sale proceeds to basically pay your commission out. Like they don't actually pay you till they get an outcome. With us, we do have an engagement fee to begin with. It kicks off the 90 days and then a success fee once they have an unconditional contract. So for a lot of first home buyers, it's not that they don't see value in us. It's more that it eats into their deposit too much and they simply can't afford us. So that's probably the biggest pushback that we get. Not that they want us to change our fees. Like they understand the value in our fees. They're just like, I simply can't afford it. So I'll circle back later. That being said, when you think about the Melbourne property market and how quickly it increases at the moment, even if it was increasing, on a 1% median change every month, like that median was creeping up by 1%, by 3 months' time, our fee would be saved in the fact that you probably can't afford now what you wanted. So
yeah, that's such an interesting point.
Spend money to make money. It's this type of, but that's the main objection.
I suppose too, though, is that if you were to, as a negotiator, again, based on your reputation, that more often than not, you're going to be able to secure a better deal than they otherwise would have been able to do on their own too, I would think.
We had one client recently who came from TikTok, funnily enough, and we negotiated a deal after it flopped at auction, and they were prepared to spend it was $860 was their budget of what they would spend on this property, and I was like, we can definitely get it for less than that. Like, $850. I was like, no, leave it with me.
Yeah, just shut
we
up
got
and
it down to like. Yeah, and this is the thing, right? If I was paid by percentage, I'd be like, yeah, just pay $850, we'll get the deal done. I got them down to, I think it was $815, and they're like, we're so happy with that. Like, let's just sign it. And I was like, nah, I reckon I can get you another $5. Like, that's a couch for your new house. Let me see if I can go in for $5 more. And we got it for $810, and signed. And they would have paid $860, $50,000 if they weren't, So there is a saving.
Yeah. And again, like, it's so interesting because it's a perception of value, right? Well, look, I mean, how many times are you buying a house in your lifetime? There's like, I'm buying multiple a year, so it's just, there's such a difference in, perceived value and actual value. And that's such a good one that's measurable.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It is hard. The off-market component is actually another real valuable piece. Like I've gotten properties off-market, exclusive access to me. A client has said no for whatever reason, and that's totally fine. But then it's gone on market with competition and it's sold for 60, 70 grand more. Great outcome for the vendor. Like, don't get me wrong, it's awesome sales result. But it's like, well, you could have had it for this, 6 weeks ago. But so there is that saving that you can't quite quantify when you buy off market as well.
In those instances too, is it again your clients are just saying, if you do look at that experience specifically, what was it that had your client not pursuing with the sale? Was it the vendor saying no? Or was it your client that said, no, I don't want to pay that?
It was just that it didn't feel like the right house, which is something that I struggle because I'm so non-emotional about the purchase, but obviously our client is their home. Like it just doesn't feel right. And I just have to take their word for that. If it doesn't feel right when they're spending that much money, who am I to say it should feel right? It's, so it just wasn't the right one.
That's tough. It's like, it's a good deal, but I mean, I've heard it said before is that we buy on emotion and we justify with logic later.
Yeah.
Whereas in your case, you're justifying the logic, but it's just, you just can't get them over across the line. That's just human nature, human nature. So if you're now with the experience you have, are you using a buyer's agent if ever you want to buy properties at this point, or are you, are you doing it for yourself?
Yeah, so I've bought 2 investment properties since using a buyer's agent out of Sydney. They cover all of Australia for investment purchases. So I have actually been a paying client of another BA to buy properties. And most recently, as this week, I've actually found a place that I would like to buy as my own home. And I don't think I can bid for myself. Like I actually don't think that is possible.
Yeah.
I've already I'm like, that's my house. So yes, that's how much I believe in it, is that I wouldn't even buy my own property. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think I've also seen that things are going so well for you guys. Like, as you say, you've got the wait list, you've moved into a new space you've mentioned, and I think the team is planning on growing come February next year.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Looking for a new recruit. So yeah, it's all systems go at the moment.
Yeah.
So I suppose with that case, mate, like, the next 6 months, then is it you still want to be continuing in the role that you are doing, or are you hoping to transition to an educator for growing a team at this point?
Yeah, very much the latter. So I will step away to a degree from doing the deals. I'll be more so coaching the team how to do the deals and step in where I need to with relationships that I have. But I actually want to travel a lot more. I feel like I've missed my traveling years a little bit because I started the business when I was 25. And so I've had my head down for 5 years. And I just want to like see the world. So I will do lead generation through the form of content, educating people, and then helping the team out remotely with coaching and training. And then there'll be a team that grows with Harry stepping up more into a BA role, and then other people stepping into the business as well. So I've been saying for a long time that I don't want to grow. I like a lean team, but I've realized that, actually I do need people. So
well, I guess it's like you said, when you took the jump from like the corporate world into this, you were kind of like, I was unprepared and naive and I just went for it. Sounds like you just, it's time just to level up to the next level. And look, you can do it from anywhere in the world, like the power of Zoom now. You could be doing your meetings from, I don't know, the Bahamas or Europe.
Through the connections we have with the leading real estate agents, FIABSI, maybe I might even send you those details, is that connect you with like, I mean, those guys buy internationally.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they, like with that stuff, then they buy all across the world. So the networks that they build are very, very different again, So
that would be cool if Emily from Tasmania just took over the world.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't got to cover off on your podcasting side, but do you want to give it a quick plug and let our listeners know that if they enjoy our rubbish, that you might actually get some information from your show?
You've got to give yourself a bit more credit than that. I think this is awesome what you guys are doing, and we're doing something similar, really. Like you can never listen to enough podcasts, in my opinion. Always commuting and always something in your ears. So I co-host the My Millennial Property Show, and along with another John Pigeon, and we just talk about all topics to do with buying property. I'm more about home buying. John's more about investing, and then together we just answer questions and have a yarn, and hopefully people get value out of it.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a stack of episodes out there, and it's also part of like the My Money
Millennial,
My Millennial Money is the overarching brand, I guess, and they've got all these little subcategories of different topics.
Yeah, I hadn't realized until I did a bit more research that they've branched out into all these other places. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's a great ecosystem to create it, that's for sure.
Yeah,
awesome.
Glenn's basically a full-time podcaster who runs My Millennial Money. That's his job.
Isn't it crazy? I remember when I went to uni studying teaching, they were saying about how, when you start teaching kids, by the time they graduate, there'll be new jobs that didn't exist.
Yeah.
When they're thinking, like, if someone said, you're a full-time podcaster, or even when I think, like, I run the media team here, I'm just like, how is this a real job? This is not a real job.
Yeah.
But, thank you so much for coming on and having a yarn with us. Good luck with the kind of next step up into the big leagues. You're already taking over the big leagues and kicking butt, but
I don't know about that.
At least giving yourself a holiday, I guess.
Yeah. Go on a holiday, go around the world, train up your team, let Harry do all the hard work for a little while.
Yeah. Harry's turn.
Yeah, Harry's turn.
Thank you so much. We'll put some plugs in at the end to the show. Do you want to direct anybody anywhere in particular?
Not really. If they search my name or they search My Millennial Property, they'll find me eventually,
Awesome. Not a problem. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Moving forward. You have been listening to the Property Pod, recorded and edited by 414 Media House in conjunction with 414 Property Code.
This podcast is general information only, and the thoughts and views expressed is the opinion of our panel, and listeners should always seek and use their own investigation into any topic we discuss to ensure they fully understand their own situation.
It does not constitute and should not be relied on as purchasing, selling, financial or investment advice or recommendations, express or implied, and it should not be used as an invitation to take up any agent or investment services. No investment decision or activity should be undertaken on the basis of this information without first seeking qualified and professional advice.